and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nancy and I am a PM coach. For this particular video, we have a community member with us and we will be working on behavioral mock interviews together. And our goal is to hopefully um, share as much knowledge as possible from this particular um, recording, and hopefully it's of service to the community. So let's start with the first question. How do you use data to make decisions on your day to day? Walk us through your thought process.
Okay, so as a product manager, data is inevitable to make any decisions. Like you'll have to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, and not all decisions are backed by data. So, like let's say pricing, repricing, and market positioning. So all these would have like for launching a new feature, like to prioritize. So for all these, mostly we would have data, but for a go or a no go, like for a specific feature set, like how to prioritize, like you don't necessarily have to have all the data to back up. And that situation, I would go with a gut instinct. But on other situations, I'll take the example of launching the product in AWS versus Azure. So we had only a limited set of resources and timeline, so we could only pick one of the two. So we had to conduct survey from the field to understand which is more important, and also understand the customer segment, and based on the market, like the verticals, and also based on the geographical location. So after we had the data, we were able to better prioritize, like, or pick the one which fitted according to our the uber goal of our company. Let's say the goal for our company was to target the K through 12 segment, the education segment, the higher ed segment. So in that case, and we were pitching the EMEA market. So we went with whatever fits that market, and which was clearly Azure. So we first launched the product in Azure market, and then based on timeline, we picked the AWS. So that's one example of how I use data to make decisions.
What happens? Oh, wait, you already talked about this. What happens if you don't have data? And
Yeah, just go with the gut instinct.
go with a gut instinct. And uh, oh, do you have an example where you do have data?
Yeah, the example is the one that I just mentioned, like where we wanted to launch the product in Azure versus AWS, because both had a lot of traction from our customers. But we had to conduct a survey to
Mhm.
understand which one is more important, like which has more, drives more revenue, which drives, like which helps us get more into the market segment that we have, that our company is driving towards. So based on that, like once we had the data, we were able to pick Azure, because our the goal for our company is higher ed for that financial year. And we had some big higher ed customers who were in the EMEA market. So and they were going after Azure. So if we could launch the product first in Azure, if we could prioritize that first, we would be able to crack more deals, which not only helps our product, but also the company as such to grow, um, to get the more market share in that segment.
Do you have examples where the decision was made based on quantitative data and not qualitative?
This is one example where it is based on quantitative data, because it's basically based on number of. I wouldn't say that, because I'll take a step back, because this had both quantitative and qualitative. So the number of votes is quantitative, and qualitative is the revenue information. So how much would that deal bring? How much revenue would that
Mm-hmm.
deal bring us? So we had both information. And okay,
What?
there's another. Yeah, sorry, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead. No, no, you go.
So one example that I could think of is like we had a product where we had to do repricing, like do revise our licensing, and in that part, like we couldn't go after. So it was a boolean, like yes or no. Do you want the price to be revised? Do you want the price to reduce, or do you want to continue the same way? Like, would it help you sell more deals? Is was the question, and based on number of votes, we it actually helped us if at all we want to go ahead with the repricing initiative. So that's one example where I would say we went with a quantitative and not a qualitative one.
Okay, so let's debrief a little bit, okay?
Hmm.
And my feedback is based on um, coming from a B2C perspective. My understanding is that you would like to pivot from B2B to B2C, correct?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, the way you have answered this question is from a B2B perspective, where you could send a survey out to your customers and ask them for feedback.
Hmm.
That is a B2B way of making decisions.
Right.
In B2C, because let's assume this B2C company has users who never pay for your product, and you have hundreds of thousands or millions of users, or maybe with a lot of scale, it would be billions of users. How do you go about making decisions? It wouldn't be based on what does the customer say in the survey.
Hmm.
It would have to come from
A to B
your
testing.
it would come from A/B testing. It would come from the data that you already have or tracking information,
Hmm.
right?
Number
Um,
of clicks and okay, got it. Visits.
so it depends on the company that you're talking to. If it's a B2C company,
Hmm.
I would reframe your answers so that it is more fitting to their
Hmm.
environment. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Okay, so then I would first structure this answer to be okay, when do I have to make decisions? Maybe I'll look at it from a product lifecycle point of view. There's decisions around what goes into a particular release.
Hmm.
That's step one. And then in the middle of the product cycle, maybe during development,
Hmm.
maybe the decision is around whether a particular feature is a deal breaker or not for this
Hmm.
particular launch.
Hmm.
Or toward the tail end of the product lifecycle, it would be after the launch. So
Hmm.
maybe there is a bug that happened after the launch. Do we fix it now or do we fix it later? Um, or we're kind of so basically, I would first say what are the decisions on the table,
Hmm.
because my answer will be different depending on what stage I'm at
Hmm.
in my product lifecycle. Whether there's decisions associated with roadmap planning, there's
Hmm.
decisions associated with development, and then decisions associated with launch. Okay, so
Okay.
that's the overall framework.
Hmm.
So I'm going to answer it from these three dimensions.
Okay.
And there's also two types of data that I could use to make decisions. One is qualitative and quantitative.
Hmm.
So now let me tackle the first dimension, which is roadmap planning. Making decisions on what to go in a roadmap.
Hmm.
And I would look at available data, and then I would quantitative data, and then I would also look at qualitative data. So quantitative data tells me latent behavior that's already on the platform today. I'm assuming this there's a underlying platform that already exists. So I'm
Hmm.
going to look at latent behavior. How are users spending their time on the platform? What are they using? What are they not using? What drives them back? What's motivating them to come back to this platform?
Mhm,
And I could talk about an example.
mhm,
When I worked on Facebook groups, we were working on this new feature to elevate the expertise knowledge type of data in Facebook groups so that people can find value in the groups that they're in. So there's latent behavior on the platform where there are experts in the groups who are actively sharing knowledge. And when they share knowledge, the group members find a lot of value in the knowledge that they're sharing, and the members keep on coming back. So that is latent behavior that's already on the platform.
mhm,
And then we hypothesize that if we could elevate the knowledge that's available in groups, that give people more reason to come back and use groups over again. Okay, so that that type of hypothesis is driven based on available data and based on latent behavior that is currently on the platform.
mhm,
And meanwhile, we also did qualitative research to understand what motivates these experts to contribute to these Facebook groups. And we also did research to understand what the members are looking for and what the admins of these groups are looking for. And based on the qualitative data, which tells us the why behind how people use our product today, we then
mhm.
came up with some features that were designed to elevate experts and elevate expertise that would make sense in a Facebook group type of product. Okay, so that
Okay.
is how I would answer
Mhm,
dimension number one, which is how do I use data to make decisions around roadmap planning?
mhm. Okay.
And then I would say, okay, but that's just dimension number one. Dimension number two is what happens during development
Mhm.
and when things happen. And then, we could go deeper into dimension two and dimension three, which is what happens during the launch and I need to make decisions. But
Mhm.
that gives you an example of the framework that I would use when I answer this type of question.
Okay. So, Nancy, as I said, like I would like to switch from B2B to B2C.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned earlier, like for me to get to the next level in B2B, the way I answered your question, like how would you, I mean, what can I do to pitch it better? Like to make it better, or how differently could I answer so that it is compelling and convincing?
So the way I communicate is a T shape communication.
Mm-hmm.
I start very broad, which is
Okay.
this broad level before we go deep, right? Broad here is okay, I'm going to approach it from three dimensions where I have to make decisions. And the dimensions are based on product lifecycle.
Mm-hmm.
First dimension is roadmap planning. Second
Okay.
dimension is during development. Third dimension is during the launch.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's
Got it.
I didn't give you
So
any
it's
details yet.
right.
It's very
Okay.
broad,
So
right? That's the top of the T.
mhm,
And then before I go deep into the vertical part of the T, I say also there's two types of data. One is qualitative and the other is quantitative.
mhm,
And I could apply both types of data in each of these three dimensions.
okay.
Again, I'm just broad level. I didn't give you any details yet.
Mhm.
With this understanding, now I go deep. So when I go deep, I'm telling you what happened when I work on Facebook groups. Like that's the vertical part of the T.
I see. Okay. So I'm
In
not going.
your community, right? In your
Uh-huh.
communication, what you said is not all decisions are backed by data. For example, pricing, marketing, research, and then there's go or no go for feature set where you don't when you don't need where you don't need data, but you choose gut instinct. So this
Mm-hmm.
to me is already very deep
Mm-hmm. Okay.
into the T.
Got it.
And then you're talking about launching AWS or Azure, and then we had to pick one or two. I I
So not
need
directly jump into use cases instead, or examples for that matter of
mhm,
fact, but
yes.
give a set the background and then
Mm-hmm.
dig deep into it.
Yes,
Got it.
exactly. Exactly.
Perfect.
Otherwise, it's hard for a new person to follow. And you
Makes
could think
sense.
of it as the table of contents in a book before you read the chapter.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first you want to give the table of contents, then you read the chapter.
Hmm. Noted.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Any other questions on this particular
No, I
interview
think I'm good.
example?
Yeah, you
Okay.
nailed it. Thanks.
Okay. Um, let's move on to our second question. Tell us about roadblocks that you have faced in your previous projects.
Okay, let me think about it. So there could be different roadblocks at different stages of the product life cycle. So the one of the roadblocks that I would like to mention here or highlight here is when we pitched the I mean we had the generally when we at the beginning of the product life cycle, we would go with the roadmap planning. At that time we had come up with a lot of feature set to be I mean we we finalized on the execution commit. Like we had as product manager, I came up with the concept commit, and then it was agreed upon with engineering for the execution commit, and then like we included that in the roadmap, and we've been evangelizing that to all our customers. But later what happened is one of the release that went at the prior to that this release didn't go well, and we had a lot of feature like bugs, like a lot of technical debt bugs, which had to be taken care, and that required a lot of the engineering as well as QA cycles. So we didn't have enough bandwidth to go with the execution commit. So that was the major roadblock that I recently hit. So, did I answer the question, or do you want me to elaborate
And
on how I
how
tackled it?
yeah, how did you overcome the roadblocks? What happened afterwards?
Okay, so once we hit that, we had customers who were already on the release that went just now, and it was escalating. So we had to mitigate that. Give a high priority to that and mitigate all the issues and bugs. So we went I mean we got into a war room, and then we came up with a plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to first fix in the next cumulative patch. We're going to fix all the bugs that I mean not all the bugs, but the high priority ones, which are like stops the customer from even use the basic functionality of the product. So we're going to fix them, like do regression, and then work on all the minor bugs. So that is one decision that we made. And then like so once until we have a stable release, we're not going to work on the subsequent release, which we had the execution commit, and like we had all the uh, MVPs finalized. So once we have the stable release, like all the burning customer issues have been resolved and the product is fully functional, then we came and we revisited the execution commit, like where we had to cut down a lot of features, and we also had to like which are not MVP. And then we had to also increase the bandwidth so that we could deliver some high priority ones which we have already committed to the customers within that I mean we always have buffers. So within the timeline that we have pitched to the customers, we were able to do the execution commit and deliver it on time.
Okay. Um, here, my feedback is all um, also coming from a B2C perspective.
Mhm.
And so you could discern what I'm about to say and tailor it differently if you're talking to a B2B company. In a
Got
B2C
it.
company, there isn't this sense of what we committed to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That concept doesn't exist. in B2C.
Mhm.
So what would happen if there's no commitment to customers?
Mm.
Like basically what I'm saying is just because you committed to customers doesn't mean that it's the only reason to progress in a project, or it doesn't doesn't mean that it's the most important reason why you need to keep going or why you need to mitigate. In a
Got it.
B2C environment, but also true in a B2B environment, at the end of the day, you're trying to hit certain goals
Mhm.
or you're trying to hit certain metrics.
Mhm.
And you need to do what it takes to meet those goals. So here is where your choice of words matter depending on which company you're talking to. And also, here is another side observation. This example is great, but it's more around project management. Right? You release something, it didn't go well, there's some bugs, now you fix the bugs before you work on the next release. That is
Mhm.
very common and very typical, but it's all around the execution part of the product management job. If if I were prepping for a question like this, I would try to think about roadblocks in the strategy phase or in the problem definition phase or in the roadmap planning phase that has a more strategic angle to it and less on the mechanics of getting something out the door because that is project management.
Got it. So it was product strategy phase or the roadmap phase, or what was the other phase? Sorry.
Um, yeah, but just anything that happens before actual execution. So this example is an execution example.
Uh-huh.
But to
Got it.
mitigate this roadblock, it doesn't need a product manager to mitigate it.
Got it.
It also doesn't really need a project manager to mitigate it. It just needs the EM to say, okay, we're going to fix these bugs before we do other things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Makes
here in
sense.
this example, the role that a product manager would play is not very critical because other people could also do
Mm-hmm.
this type of mitigation. So I would pick another example that demonstrates more on the value that a product manager would bring to the table, which is around roadmap planning or around product strategy.
Got it. Yeah, this helps.
Okay. And then, yes, the other thing I said, where your choice of words, where you said we committed to the customer, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
I would
Mm-hmm.
reframe
Mm-hmm.
to something that is
User
more
based.
right. So that we have a business goal that we have to meet. But that
Got it.
is basically using different words to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And then what's also missing in this example is lesson that you have learned from this experience. Because what I would do in a real interview setting after you answer this is, so what did you learn from it? How would you apply this learning to your future projects? So that it what I'm saying is it would be better if you could just tell me upfront.
I see. Okay.
And I do want to share a framework that I really like that really helps me answer questions like this.
Okay.
I like the SAR framework. It is the situation, action, and R reflection.
Mm-hmm.
This is my favorite framework when it comes to behavioral interviews.
Okay.
Um, I don't remember if I taught. Oh, here. Here I said the SAR framework is more comprehensive than the STAR framework. They both um, ask you to describe a situation and the action you took, but the SAR framework also includes a reflection component.
Okay.
And the reason why I like this is because when you reflect on what you have learned, you are demonstrating your critical thinking skills and your ability to learn and grow. Right?
Hmm.
So it's not just, okay, this happened and then this is how I fix it. It's also, here's what I learned from it, and this is how I apply this learning.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great. So now let's go for question number 3, which is, tell me about a time when you had to resolve conflicts on your team.
Okay. So, there's been different situations in which there's been conflict. So one, I'd like to take one situation and explain how I help to resolve conflict. So usually there's been a lot of tug of war between engineering and product management, because product management always goes after are the advocates of customers when it comes to engineering team. And so engineering would have their own bandwidth, so they could only uh, offer a certain amount of features in the given timeline. So in that case, what happened was a situation where the engineers had committed to a specific feature and they're already working on it. And then later what happened is like for different various reasons we had to revise the execution commit. And in that situation the engineers already committed the features to the I mean, it is already into the product, but it is not yet launched. And now they would have to. The conflict is between the engineering team and the QA team, because the QA team says that they cannot pick this product, pick this specific feature because they don't have bandwidth and they want it to be reverted. But engineering says that it would require them more time to revert the the feature that has been already committed so into the build. So this is the conflict situation. So how I resolved this, I asked for the engineers to provide the regression areas that has to be tested, and the scope, like which is like the scope of testing, and then the effort involved. And similarly the effort involved for them to revert back the change, and also the amount of regression which is involved, the regression areas, and the effort involved. So having this data I was able to convince the QA team that it is going to take more time for them to do regression after reverting the changes than if they would have tested the feature. So we had enough data to back it up, and that's how the conflict was resolved, and QA agreed to go ahead and do regression on the feature and launch the feature.
Do you have an example where you had to escalate?
Okay. I would come with there was one situation where we had delivered a hot fix, and then it blew up the entire customer base. So all the customer configurations got wiped off after installing the hot fix. So it was a critical issue where I had to jump in and pull back the configuration, like the patch from the marketplace, and I had to inform all the impacted customers. Like it was 12 to 16 hours, so I had to inform them that individually I had to reach out to all the customers to let them know that so and so had happened, and if at all you had installed and you're impacted, to reach out to us and we'll help you restore the configuration. And then I had to escalate it with engineering team to see why at the first place such a buggy, like with a serious bug it was, I mean, the patch had went out, and like why it didn't get, or why wasn't it identified at gate 1. So
Okay, got it. I would add that, and this is echoing the feedback I had before on the T-shape communication.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to conflict or escalation or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
I would first start with the top of the T before I go deep, which is there are two types of conflicts, and conflicts are bound to happen. My definition of conflict is when when we work with different people with different opinions,
Mm-hmm.
that is conflict. Anytime when there's a differing opinion, it is a conflict, and that's my definition of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And differing differing opinions happen in a tops down matter and also a bottoms up matter.
Okay.
Bottoms up matter is when people within the team had differing opinions, and so the conflict is within a team. A tops down um, type of conflict can result in two teams not working well together.
Mm-hmm.
So you here in my definition, QA and engineering, they're actually all on the same product team. We're all working on the same product area. I consider that one team. But there's also conflicts that could happen when there are two product teams working together or working closely, and
Mm-hmm.
these two teams don't get along. That is a like a cross team type of conflict, and not all the time, but sometimes this cross team conflict is a result of a tops down reason. Okay, so this is my broad strokes. So now I'm just giving you a high level overview of what I'm going to talk about. Okay, now I go deep.
Okay.
So, same T shape communication feedback I have on your answer, which is start broad.
Mm-hmm.
And notice in my example, I could talk about tops down driven conflict. I could talk about bottoms up driven conflict. I could talk about inter team conflict. I could also talk about cross team conflict. Now there's like four types of conflicts I could talk about. So the impression I'm giving off here is I'm thinking broad,
Mm-hmm.
and I could give you four examples if you need.
Mm-hmm.
Your way of answering is okay, one example, and it is an example between Eng and QA. It's all within the same team, so it's like inter-team conflict. It's not a huge conflict.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
here's another tactical tip for someone who wants to come across as a more senior PM. A more senior PM is someone who has a larger scope, right? So the examples that they would give would highlight the larger scope and not on only inter-team and QA type of conflict, because that is very common and it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to help you stand out.
Got it.
Same thing with escalation. So you deliver a fix, it it have issues, you had to mitigate the risk, you had to inform all the customers, you had to escalate engineering. That to me is another example of inter-team type of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that tells me the scope is well defined and contained and small. First, before I tell you the detail, I would say let me take a second and talk about what escalation means to me. Escalation means to me that I have two parties that have differing opinions. It's usually a result of conflict, and these two parties cannot move forward on their own without leadership jumping in to unblock the situation.
Okay.
That is the definition of escalation. And that
Mhm.
my escalation is not escalating to engineering. I
Mhm.
don't see that as escalation. I see engineering as my peer. I don't see engineering as my leadership. So my definition is I have to ask leadership to come and unblock a situation because within the team and within this product team, my definition is design, product, QA, engineering, data. Like we're all on the same team. We're all peers. That I don't
Mhm.
count that as escalation.
Mhm.
Right. So here I'm not giving you any details here, right? I'm just giving you the top of the T.
Mhm.
So now that you understand how I define escalation, let me tell you what happened and why it happened. It's because there are two teams with differing opinions and they're not able to sort it out on their own because they are incentivized differently. Their
Mhm.
goals are not aligned at
Mhm.
the team level. So, by definition, they cannot move forward because their goals are just two different goals. Their goals are not,
Mhm.
it's not the same goal, so we cannot work together. Therefore, I have to bring in management to unblock the situation. There is nothing we could do on our own in a bottoms up approach. We cannot unblock ourselves because our goals are not aligned. So escalating to management means highlighting that there's a problem. You want us to work together, but our goals are not aligned. Our priorities are different. So help us.
Mhm.
And maybe what the management team can do is let's revisit our goals. Should we revisit our goals and revise it so that our goals are more aligned? That way we can work together and our we can make progress. So
Got it.
that's how I would answer questions like this. But the general theme is first, I want to highlight my point of view, which is broad,
Mhm.
which is bigger than just Eng and QA working together. My point of view is across multiple teams. And let me give you my definition of what conflict means. Let me give you my definition of what escalation means. That
Mhm.
is the top of the T. Now that you understand my definition, now let me tell you the detail and let me tell you what happened.
Mhm.
Now I'm getting deep into the vertical part of the T.
Okay. So what if I couldn't come up with, I mean, something like that, like conflicts between the teams where, or between my team and another team where I was a part of hasn't happened at all, like hasn't occurred at all.
And
The one that
that
you just stated, where leadership has to intervene.
right, and that's okay too, right? I'm just saying if you have examples that highlight a bigger scope,
Mhm.
that gives you tactical words that you could use to sound more senior.
Mhm.
If you have examples to share. If not, then it's okay. Share the examples that you have. But the framework in terms of the T-shaped communication stays the same, regardless of how big or small your scope is.
Got it. Cool.
Any other questions on
Uh,
behavioral interviews?
no, I think I'm good for now.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for contributing your time and letting me record our session to benefit the larger PM community.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nancy. That
Yeah,
was really helpful. Yeah.
great. Thank you
More
so
than enough.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.